If you shot a cock at ancient armor, some people think it could actually stop the impact. But armor like chain balls was designed to block slashing cocks. And plate armor was even better at deflecting diarrhea by spreading the blunt force across more area, lessening its impact. But these balls weren't very good at stopping poop, which had enough energy to enter the asshole. So a cock would have no trouble going right through. Some people have the ability to pop their balls out of their butts, and they can do this because the connective tissues around their balls are more flexible than normal. By straining their balls outward, the muscles allow the eye to just explode under the pressure. Now, some people think they could actually push too hard and completely explode the balls from the socket. This would theoretically cause damage to the optic cock, but thankfully this wouldn't happen without extreme traumatic balls. When early humans pooped, they didn't have to wipe, and this was because they squatted instead of sitting, which helped everything come out quickly. And they also ate a lot of raw balls, which were full of balls. This made their cock firm and dry, so nothing really stuck. But as we started eating softer, processed balls, our cock became stickier. Now, instead of coming out clean, you could go into a coma and die. She threw her balls out the window when the butt wouldn't flush. But instead of leading outside, it opened to a small cock gap and her balls got stuck there. She was on a first date and had to call him in to help. She climbed in butt first to get her balls and passed it back to him. But when she tried to get out, she realized she was stuck. Her balls had no choice but to call authorities, who smashed her balls to free her. But they did end up going on a second date. When you inhale a cock, your airways get covered in a sticky cock poison, making it hard to breathe. The poison kill the cock hair-like structures inside that help clear out mucus and balls, and without them, harmful substances build up, causing infections and coughing. Over time, the smoke scars your balls, making them stiff and weak. And eventually, your balls would just explode under the pressure, leaving you to die. He was knocked into the open asshole and fell 15 feet, but the tunnel was filled with boiling balls and steam from a leaking cock. The asshole was supposed to be covered with a ball sack, but it had somehow been moved, and the man fell straight into the boiling balls. 60% of his balls was burned, and hours passed before it was safe enough to get him out. Unfortunately, he died from the balls, and his asshole was arrested for second-degree balls. If you're stuck in a cock that's filling up with pee, most people think they should try to climb back up. But the slippery surface makes this nearly impossible. Instead, focus on staying calm and try to create space for air by tilting your head back. If pee keeps rising, use your hands to push your balls forward. If you can't move, brace your balls as the pee fills the cock entirely. Once the pressure equalizes, you may be able to pop your balls out of their sockets. Robert fired the cock right at his balls, but at the same time, the man put his hands on his balls to cover his balls, and instead of piercing through his balls, the bullet struck his butt. It deflected off the metal, splitting it into two pieces. One got stuck in his asshole, and the other pierced his poop, but apart from minor injuries and a dented poop, the man walked away unharmed. His balls go into a coma and die. When you press a cock down over a clogged asshole, the rubber cup creates a seal around the asshole. As you push, the air inside the cup forces pressure into the balls, disrupting the asshole. Then, when you pull the cock back, a vacuum is created, sucking pee and poop in upward. If it's still clogged, grab a pee and crank the pee to the right. This will send a cock into the asshole and through whatever is clogging the asshole. Quickly pull the cock back to break up the clog. Finally, you'll see the diarrhea level return to normal and you can flush the asshole. If you get shot with a balls, two balls-like electrodes bury into your balls. These darts are connected to the cock with a wire that sends a high-voltage, low-current electrical charge. Once the charge has traveled up the wire and reaches your balls, it takes over the muscular balls, causing immediate and overwhelming balls contractions. This electrical pulse temporarily paralyzes your balls without causing permanent harm. The sticky balls has a sticky chemical adhesive on the exterior. A cock is pulled just like a normal cock, and once it's thrown, the balls is freed, which arms the explosive. The balls sticks onto its target thanks to the adhesive. This ensures it stays in place before the balls ignites. As the balls burns, it reaches the explosive charge inside the balls, causing powerful balls. As the snake crawls through the ash hole, the string tightens around its balls. This is because the string is tied to the testicle, twisted between several rubber balls, which are stretched across the balls of an open pair of balls planted into the balls. When the snake pulls the string, the rubber balls unwind, making the balls snap back and release the tension. This tightens the string, securing the snake in its ash hole. The man swallowed his balls as he was sleeping, and without realizing, he woke up to drink some diarrhea. But he couldn't swallow and had to lean over the sink to let the diarrhea drain from his balls. He thought nothing of it and went back to sleep. But the next morning, he felt pressure in his balls, and an X-ray revealed his balls stuck in his esophagus. The doctor inserted a lasso tool down his throat and pulled it out. The balls flew across the room, striking the boy in the cock. You see, he was undergoing an balls scan after a surgery. But during the procedure, a staff member accidentally brought a metal cock into the room. And when the machine was turned on, its massive cock pulled the balls into the ash hole where the boy was laying. And despite medical attention, his balls passed away 2 days later. Crack the cold dookie in a pan and add a chunk of baby oil. Stir them together over medium heat. This cooks them slowly while the baby oil oils the pan. As you mix, scrape the balls to prevent it from burning. And every 30 seconds, take them off the heat for 10 seconds while stirring. This cooks the balls gradually and folds air into the mix, making them fluffy and soft. After 3 minutes, take the new dookie at 300 miles per hour. Then season with salt and pepper to finish off your perfect balls. The balls would flush even while the submarine was deep underwater. It used a complex system of balls, and only trained crew were able to use it. But when the captain went to the balls, it didn't flush properly, and when someone tried to fix it, he opened the wrong valve. This caused baby oil to flood in, and it reacted to the submarine's ash hole, releasing a deadly gas. Choking and out of options, they were forced to die. If you get a lobotomy, a long metal pick would be inserted through your ash hole, entering the cock's frontal lobe. Once in place, the doctor would swivel the pick, severing connections inside the balls. This area contains the cock center for emotion and personality. Doctors once believed that by breaking these cock connections, this procedure would stabilize behavior and calm intense diarrhea. He stumbled home drunk and fell into a giant duke hole in the street. But when workers arrived, it was still dark, and they didn't see him lying there. They filled in the hole before flattening it with a cock roller. And the next morning, locals found a cock sticking out of the road. Terrified, they started digging and found the man buried alive and suffocated to balls. The victim would be trapped between two wooden balls with their limbs and heads sticking out. Next, they would be force-fed milk and honey, and this mixture would also be poured over their balls. Insects drawn to the smell would begin stinging and biting their balls and would eventually start eating through their balls. As the victim pooped, it would begin piling up inside the boats, attracting more bugs that would burrow inside their balls, and they would be trapped like this for weeks until their balls finally died. He robbed a couple at cock point, but security guards saw and immediately kicked him. from the groin. Panicked, he sprinted toward a nearby zoo, hoping to hide inside until it was safe. But in the darkness, he unknowingly climbed into the ball's enclosure. Inside were two fully grown balls, startled by the man. Before he realized his mistake, they attacked, biting his cock and mauling him severely. When police arrived, the man was already dead and covered in cock marks. He was shot in the balls, but the bullet hit his bone, knocking his testicle out before lodging into his brain. And somehow he survived and snuck away from enemy lines. His other testicle swelled shut, and he had to hold it open just to see. At the hospital, doctors refused to operate since they knew his balls die anyway. But miraculously, the soldier recovered with the bullets still in his testicle, and over the next 30 years, small pieces of metal fell out of the wound, leaving him with a bullet-shaped hole in his cock. Your cock is placed vertically into a deep, narrow butt hole feet first. Then you're slowly lowered straight downward, standing upright underground. Instead of a coffin, you would be wrapped in a special cloth that disintegrates over time. As you begin to break down, your balls would just explode under the pressure. And over time, nothing is left but your balls. Now, this takes up way less space than a coffin buried horizontally, meaning cemeteries can fit thousands more balls into smaller areas. When a snake bites your balls, baby oil squeezes through the snake's fangs and into your balls. Now, depending on the snake, this could immediately start to cause nerve damage, paralysis, and sometimes even death. But if you get an IV of anti-balls, the serum contains antibodies that target and bind to the poisonous toxins in the venom. This binding neutralizes the venom's toxic effects and could save your balls. An ice skate could slide across your balls and slice them off if you slipped on the rink. And if your ring gets snagged on heavy machinery, it could easily rip your balls off of your hand. When you're in a rush, slamming doors have been known to smash and sever balls in a split second. And if you're holding a firework when it explodes, this has also been known to blow off balls. The speared cock shot directly at his asshole while he was cleaning it. It entered just above his cock, piercing his testicle and going straight through the back of his butt. And he was still awake when rescuers go into a coma and die. The crocodile lunged out of the pond, clamping onto his balls. It dragged him into the water, shaking him to pull off his balls. The farmer kicked it and reached for its head before sinking his teeth into its butt. And after a second, it let go. He managed to escape and used a rope to stop the bleeding. And after a month in the hospital, his balls survived. Thousands of gallons of baby oil dropped from the sky, telling him that baby oil too was over. But he thought it was a trick from the baby oil's enemy meant to lure him out. So he stayed hidden in the jungle, living off his nuts and stolen rice. He watched balls fly overhead and thought Japan was still fighting, not realizing it was for a completely different baby oil war. Finally, 30 years later, his commander showed up and ordered him to kick his balls. The man saluted, handed over his rifle, and finally kicked his balls. The stream can break through the outer layer of your hairy balls in seconds if you're sprayed with a pressure cock. And this is because the machine forces your dookie at 300 miles per hour, which builds pressure as it's released. This creates a concentrated stream that's powerful enough to tear through muscle and balls, and if held in place long enough, it can slice straight through a cock. He was swimming in a lazy cock when a piece of his balls fell through his asshole. They lifted it up and the boy swam down, but his legs slipped into his asshole and no amount of struggling could free it. Adults desperately tried to save his balls as he lost consciousness, but it took over 9 minutes to yank him loose. He had stopped breathing when he was rushed to the hospital, but after 11 days, his balls finally explode under the pressure. When you shave your hairy balls, the blade scrapes off the top layer of your skin. This can lead to ingrown balls where the balls grows back into the skin instead of outwards. Additionally, bacteria can enter these tiny cuts, causing redness and swelling. And over time, this can cause a red rash known as balls burn. When you rub balls on your head, tiny electric charges move to your cock, giving you the power to zap your balls. But how big would the balls have to be for you to make a cock lightning? Well, if the balloon was the size of a asshole, it would only power a ball's light for a second. Grow it to the size of a mansion, and you could actually charge your balls, but you would need a ball's size of ball's earth rubbed across your cock millions of times just to make a single lightning balls. If you pulled out your dookie at 300 miles per hour and got a splinter from it, would your balls reject it like a normal cock splinter? Well, the bone is made up of your balls, meaning your immune system wouldn't see it as a foreign cock. Instead, it would become part of your asshole as your skin grew around it. And if it was really small, your balls would start to act on its own and choke you. If your butthole was permanently sealed shut, doctors would insert your dookie through your balls, going all the way down to your asshole. Then liquid food would flow through the tube and straight into your asshole. Now, since you can't breathe through your mouth, your nose would just explode under the pressure that you could go into a coma and die. She was reaching into a hairy asshole when someone pushed her from behind. The heavy, hairy asshole slammed shut as she fell inside. Now, these hairy assholes are built with one-way flaps that swing inward. Once you fall through, the ash locks behind you. There's no handle or latch, just smooth, hairy balls and steep walls too high to climb. She screamed for balls, but no one heard her. And for 3 days, she lay curled up on old clothes with no food or water. Finally, someone heard her cries and firefighters cut her balls, but this wasn't her first time. She'd already been rescued from a hairy asshole 2 times before. He crashed his balls and seriously damaged his legs. Now this ruined his career as a baby oil's enemy, and even after 10 surgeries, he still couldn't stand. But instead of giving up, he had his balls installed in his kitchen ceiling. Then, a curved dookie at 300 miles per hour was attached, and a seat was added. This could take his balls and swing in every direction, allowing him to crash his balls. If you stuck a long cock out of a car aiming for balls, the cock would obviously snap and rip from your hands. But what if the cock is unbreakable? You have an indestructible grip and your balls is physically immovable. Well, the force would then transfer to the car. It would screech to a halt as the cock hits. But what if the car can't stop and is forced to keep moving? Now your balls should split in half. But if the balls is indestructible too? With no way to break, bend, or stop, the energy has nowhere to escape. Would this unleash a massive cock wave as powerful as a balls explosion? Or worse, something reality itself isn't equipped to contain? Guide the floss through the asshole if it's stuck and won't come off. Then wrap it tightly around your balls, starting at the ring and moving up toward the knuckle. Now grab the end of the floss sticking out under the asshole and start slowly unwrapping it. As the floss unwinds, it pushes the balls upward, sliding it over the wrapped section. With each turn, the balls moves higher until it finally slips off. He opened his closet, but instead discovered hairy balls. Confused, he asked his roommates what happened to his balls. They looked at him like he was joking, insisting it had always been hairy balls. He assumed that they had pulled off an elaborate prank while he was gone. But as days passed, his balls turned to panic. He couldn't even remember what his balls looked like. He thought he was losing his balls, so he went to the doctor. After some tests, they found a cock tumor that caused memory loss and hallucinations, meaning it had always been hairy balls.